Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, well, we've saved the best for last, Bob.
Well,
as usual, you're going to get the last word on everything.
I don't know about the best, but thank you for the invitation.
Well, good. So all day long we've heard forecasts and, what's going to happen for the rest of the year. For the third year in a row, I've come here and heard that the recession's 18 months away, so we're going to have to, next year, maybe it'll change. Our economist still says we're going to hit 16.8 this year. What do your folks say?
We came out the end of the fourth quarter last year, and we said 16.6, 16.8. And there was an amazing amount of consensus across the industry. We started off on a national basis, U.S. only. January, February was a little rocky. It wasn't bad, but it came in, those 2 months came in at 16.6, but it didn't feel like it was good. The month of March came in, it surprised everyone, surprised us, 17.5. Now you got to peel a little bit behind that 17.5. There was an 8% increase in fleet volume, but retail recovered, and actually the first quarter came out, it was down 1.5 points for retail industry on the first quarter. So we're feeling very good where the economy is. We're feeling very good about consumer confidence, manufacturing confidence, interest rates, which slowed us down a little bit last year, seem to be leveled. So we're very confident. We're still 16.8. Frankly, I'm not going to be too surprised if it inches back into another, possibly a 17.0 industry later this year.
I knew we saved the best for last. Let's talk about tariffs for a minute. You were in Washington last week.
Yep.
With some of your fellow OEMs and a bunch of dealers with the AIADA fly-in. What would a 25% tariff mean for Toyota?
I can't stress enough that it's just a bad idea for the entire industry. I'll speak in industry terms and then come into Toyota a little bit more specifically. But there, as we all know within the industry, there is no such thing as a 100% U.S. produced vehicle. All manufacturers need to survive off a global supply chain. I'll use an example. For a number of years, we were the most American car by Cars.com was a Toyota Camry. And that was measured on the nuts and bolts, where the nuts and bolts sourced for the vehicle. Toyota Camry is about 72% U.S. content, number one in the industry. Number one truck for a number of years was the Sienna, because minivans are as a truck. But reverse the Camry. 72% U.S. content of the nuts and bolts came from the U.S. Reverse it, 28% comes out in on a global supply chain. If you expose that 28% to a 25% tariff, because the tariff is not only on being conceived, not only on fully built vehicles, but all the parts that supply those vehicles, a Camry would go up instantaneously about $1,800, the cost to build it. Our analysis, which is consistent with the industry, is the average vehicle in the industry would go up about $4,000. Now, if the average car, regardless of the manufacturer, whether it's Toyota or General Motors or Honda, if the average vehicle goes up $4,000, that 16.8 SAR that we're talking about drops into the low 14s pretty quickly. Because I think we know that last month the average car sold had customer payment was about $560 per month. The consumers are about as stretched as they can go on the payment. So there's no alternative but to drop volume. And if the volume drops, there goes the manufacturing capacity, there goes the employment. It certainly has a ripple effect on all the dealers that are in the room. I believe, and I'm internally optimistic on this, that is understood. But if the tariffs happened on the auto industry, quite frankly, that's pulling the pin out of the grenade, and I don't believe the U.S. economy can run out of the room fast enough to protect itself. So it's just, any way you cut it, it's just a bad situation for the industry. The industry driving the economy. I'm confident that we'll continue to work it out.
Well, your research is very consistent with the research we've commissioned. As you know, we commissioned a study from the Center for Automotive Research. The numbers are about the same. Even if USMCA is approved, in the second study we commissioned, we would see tremendous job loss. I think 77,000 jobs just at dealerships alone. And you're absolutely right. This isn't an import versus a quote-unquote domestic issue because of the part content provisions in it. But as a sort of a follow-up question, many have seen the threat of tariffs as, maybe more potent than actually imposing the tariffs, and I know we're in a very strategic, from the president's perspective, negotiation with a variety of different countries, and of course, we've done some surveying on this as well, and the message that we negotiated bad tariffs 40 years ago and the world has changed, particularly when it comes to China, has sort of come into focus. But from Toyota's perspective, how does the threatened tariff environment affect your investment in the United States? Because that, at the end of the day, is what he's trying to get at.
Well, frankly, and this may surprise some, but very little. Because when you make investments into plants, and we've recently just announced our 15th plant in North America is being built in Huntsville, Alabama. You make that kind of capital investment, and we're talking billions of dollars, you make those investment decisions on the long-term viability and your confidence of the market. To make billion-dollar investments on a 4-year political cycle is something that we're making 50-year investments. How can you possibly make them on what the political environment is today? So we obviously are very active in Washington, D.C. We're not active in politics, but we are very active in policy. And I have a wall between politics and policy, so we have to be there. But when it comes to the investments, we just recently announced $13 billion more investment from 2019, the 5 years going forward. We see it, we've committed to hiring an additional 4,000 jobs, in direct jobs, in our facilities. But that's based on where we see the market and the confidence of the U.S. and the confidence of North America, more so than it is on a current political cycle that we're involved in today.
So, speaking of deployment of capital, I don't remember a time in my career where there have been so many opportunities to invest capital from an OEM perspective, because I've never really seen a space race for autonomy going on. I've never really seen a space race going on for electrification, for connected vehicles, and it seems like we've never had so many things to spend money on. You go back to the good old formula where you would pour your money to an investment to improve range, powertrains, internal combustion engine vehicles. How do you make those decisions in today's environment to deploy capital, even on a 50-year basis? We heard one of your competitors here today, very articulate competitor, another manufacturer that happens to sell 10 million cars a year globally, saying they've invested $10 billion on electrification. How do you look through that lens when you're making those types of investments in the new technology?
Well, it's difficult because I guess overall I'm convinced, and we are collectively convinced, the future of the automotive industry is bright. This is still a wonderful model. We can talk about why we believe that. But at the same time, it's also expensive. So we have to make the investments. We're making the investments on autonomy. We're making investments in connected car. We are making investments on a global scale on electrification. We have a different point of view than other manufacturers are, but I look at it as placing strategic bets, because everyone has a crystal ball. but we're not betting our crystal ball is any better than anyone else's crystal balls. So we have a very defined plan. We have a vision of where we want to go between today and 2030. We're placing bets out there, developing other technologies, collaborating with other companies to say, if our crystal ball is a little cloudy and the market, the consumer goes a different direction, we're prepared to go with it.
So let's talk about electrification a little bit. There's been a lot of talk. We go back a long way. I might be the only one in the room that was at the 1990 CARB hearing on the ZEV mandate. You've operated in California. We've seen, in my opinion, leaps and bounds in electrification since 1990. We don't ever seem to actually hit the numbers that the government wants us to hit, and of course it's spread out to an additional 11 states. I note that last year we actually doubled electric vehicle sales. We went from 0.6 to 1.2. Looks like we're hovering around 2% nationwide. They're 4% in California. I keep hearing, and I've heard from other speakers today, about the tipping point that's coming around the corner. I read and I hear about some 80 EV models coming online from some of your competitors by 2023. Is the tipping point around the corner?
Well, you can say that in Europe, in China, largely due to forced government regulation. But in North America, in the US, no, we have a different point of view. Right now, we do believe that electrification will happen in the US, but it's much further down the road than anyone, than some are speculating right now. We're active in electrification. I mean, I'll have to go back to 1997, we started selling the first mass-produced electrified car, the Prius. And we have sold 13 million hybrid vehicles now. But full BEVs, before it gets into mainstream, the reality of it is that it's going to take significant improvement on the capability of batteries that are available today and a massive cost reduction. Now, if you go to the Silicon Valley or you read some of the stories that are out there, it talks about 10x cost reduction in batteries coming. It happened in computers and it happened in cell phones, and it's going to happen in batteries capable of powering the automobile. That's a risky proposition. We don't think that future is near term in the next 2 or 3 years. So we are developing it. You will see us slowly introduce some EVs into the US as we move into the next decade. But we think that it's really going to be a 10-year play, not a 10-month play.
So playing a little bit off of that, and you alluded to it, I know of no other OEM that has more experience or more units in operation on electric drivetrains and all the componentry that go with it, very sophisticated through your hybrid development. Let's talk a little bit about hydrogen and your Mirai. I know I drove it. I had the same feeling when I drove it the first time I drove one of your Priuses. And I went, oh, boy, this is going to be it. So, leader in electric drivetrain. The issue which some people don't separate is the energy storage system. So how do you see hybrid? Well, hydrogen.
Hybrid and hydrogen. Hydrogen's a little bit longer term play. And really the governor on hybrids or hydrogen sales is the infrastructure.
Right.
Hydrogen is is available through major industry, but to retail consumers, it's very limited. So we're looking at it as a long-term play. One of the things that hydrogen provides an advantage over electrification is how scalable it is. And actually, about 2 years ago, we introduced 2 prototypes, 2 Series 8, Class 8 over-the-road trucks that we have operating in the Port of Los Angeles right now. We've durability tested and pulling freight throughout the LA basin, 14,000 miles. And next week, we're going to introduce 10 more of these vehicles. It's the same technology it's in a Mirai. It's scalable. where it's essentially an electric vehicle, but it's not dependent on large battery packs because you're producing the electricity on board. So we do believe that it's it will probably be much more significant in the commercial end of the business and over-the-road trucking or drayage operations around ports of entry, and be a little bit longer-term play until it filters down into the retail market.
So we're here close to Wall Street and far away from Silicon Valley, but you listen to the pundits, everything's going to go electric, autonomous, and ride hail or ride share. What's your take on that future?
Well, I'll take them one at a time. As I mentioned earlier, electrification, we do believe there's a potential in the North American market, but it's much further down the road. The average vehicle sold last month, and talking to a group of dealers who know this better than I, was around $34,000. Many of the electric vehicles that are in the market today, the batteries cost $34,000 or more than $34,000, and then you got to build a car around it. So the economics are not there yet. And I believe, and I've said this confidently, there has yet to be an electric vehicle sold anywhere in the globe at break even, let alone a profit. So it's going to take more time for this to evolve. Autonomy, again, will happen. But there's a lot of governors on autonomy. First is the technology. Right now, the industry, and you can argue it, of the 5 levels of autonomy, the industry is somewhere between level 2 and level 3. And we'll be bringing about a level 3 vehicle, which is what we'll call highway teammate, that assists you to drive while you're on a freeway from on-ramp to off-ramp. But the technology is not ready for prime time to drive through the streets of Manhattan. It's much too difficult, takes many more years, it's going to take billions of miles of testing. Beyond that is the cost. Now, we do think that you'll start to see level 4, which is autonomy within defined areas, coming to market, but it will be a commercial application because this technology that's there today and some of these prototypes, the technology from a hardware alone is in excess of $100,000. What's the retail market for a level 4 or level 5 vehicle if theoretically the cost of the hardware is $100,000? So it's a much longer play. And then ride sharing, as we heard from the previous speaker, the number one cost of ride sharing is the driver. And we really don't think that ride sharing is going to materially affect the market, if it ever, until full autonomy is available. So the one comment that was in the previous speaker is over the next 10 years, the business is going to look much more like it does today than some of these dreams of the future. We fully agree with that.
Well, our research has pretty much proven that out as well. We'll have to wait and see when we come up with it. Let's switch to the dealer body a little bit. All of the hype, if we can call it hype, around autonomous vehicles, ride sharing, electrification, it's most of the stories we read are it's doom and gloom for dealers. Their dealers don't want to sell EVs because there's fewer parts. I don't know a single dealer that won't sell an EV. We go on and on and on. What steps or measures have Toyota taken to evolve its dealer body to meet the challenges in the near term? And the near term would be less than 10 years.
So that's a good question. It's really interesting. This is a very resilient industry, and if you look what dealers have done, go back just to the 70s and 80s and 90s and these kind of discussions, there's been transformational issues in front of it, whether it was the public companies coming into the market, or the internet, or we could come up with dozens of examples over the last 25 years of new technologies that were going to come in and destroy the retail network. I never believed that. Toyota never believed that. If you look at dealerships today, we have evolved significantly, for the most part, for the betterment of the consumers than we were 25 years ago. So the one thing that is very difficult in the industry right now is the gross margin compression that we're all experiencing, certainly at retail and in the margin. What we've done over the last 5 to 10 years is put a much deeper focus on the parts and service and used car side of the business. One of the biggest initiatives we started doing is every new Toyota we sell has 2 years of complimentary maintenance. That dramatically increased our retention of customers coming back into the service drives. In the future, we're looking at business models where that can be new business models that really aren't contemplated today in terms of the connected vehicles and subscriptions and new insurance products. We're running test programs around the country. The one thing that I will commit is that there is no other OEM that is more committed to a U.S. franchise system than Toyota. And I've said it to our dealers. I've said it to our dealers time and time again as we're running all these pilot programs, looking for new sources of revenue. Wherever the future takes us, wherever the future takes Toyota, we're taking our retail partners with us.
Well, as you know, and as many people in the room know, twice a year we do a dealer attitude survey, and we don't generally publish those, but I may deviate a little bit from that, and as you know, Lexus and Toyota has been at the top of the heap for several years now in our attitude survey. I
think it was 10 years, Peter, but who's counting?
I told you we didn't publish them, Bob. But at any rate, you have a lot of confidence from your dealers, and they obviously think that you're doing something right. And I know you have a saying at Toyota, which I don't hear at a lot of other OEMs, that it's the customer first, dealer second, Toyota third, relative to it. Is there a secret sauce that you use with the dealers to keep them so enamored and in the harness, so to speak, for your products?
Well, it's difficult for me to say because in the wholesale business, I've only known Toyota. But the culture of Toyota is dealers aren't dealers, they're not franchisees, they're business partners. And it goes deeper than that. Many of the dealers out there, it's family, or it's friends. So, we work in partnership with our dealers. We focus at the same time. The car business, sometimes we tend to try to make it much more difficult than it really is. I mean, honestly, none of us are landing spacecrafts on the moon. We're building and selling cars. And what was important in this business 30 years ago, and I believe is going to be important in the business 30 years from now, is two things. It's the product and it's the people. And if we believe that, so we truly, that's part of our DNA to really partner. So, frankly, we know, and I know that we could cut 20% of the bottom line of our incentive spend today if we would go to stair-stepping incentives. We don't do it because it's not the right thing to do and I'm not saying that but it's not the right thing for the customer. It's not the right thing for the dealers. Therefore, it's not the right thing for us. Now, others may be tempting, and why do things like stair-step incentives exist in the industry? Guys, we can all do it. It's not we want to reward the guys that are selling the most cars. It's a cost budget factor. We could lower the incentives. I've penciled it. Don't let them fool you. The reason that their stair steps exist in this industry is because it's a way to save 20 to 25% of your total dollar spend. And quite frankly, we're running a business. Toyota's not a charity, as your businesses aren't a charity. But there's some things we won't go, and I use that as one example how we differentiate ourselves versus other franchises that are out there.
Well, you must be clairvoyant, because the next question here was, what's Toyota's attitude towards stair steps and retro incentives relative to it? So,
I'm a little passionate on that one.
I know you are, Bob. And of course, we've done studies on that as well. And our studies also show that it destroys residual values. The transparency at a dealership is wiped away when you have a longtime customer that all of a sudden says somebody can buy, they can buy a car for $2,000 or $3,000 less, and you've sold them 3 or 4 cars over the year, and it's below your dead cost on the car. So it's maybe that's one of the secret sauces.
Well, beyond that, selling any product when you don't know what your actual cost is, I don't know if any of us can make good business out of that.
So here's another question. Why are most manufacturers forecasting 5 to 10% growth in a flat market without having super unique product or the ability to quickly ramp up popular models and trims? If production is planned on this, doesn't it cause oversupply of product, leading to high incentives and customer mistrust of the industry?
Well, I think the quick answer to that is yes. But baked in there was the incentives. And, I have a little bit different opinion. We're starting to see incentives got to an unhealthy level in the industry. And this is, again, full awareness of what's happening to margins within the industry, both in retail and the wholesale side. But what started this? When we come out of the recession, that's really when incentives got turbocharged. But I know from Toyota's perspective, when the market changed from 50-50 to 70-30, that's a dramatic change in manufacturing. And we had to make a lot of investments. We had to make massive changes within our North American production base. And so you can't, unfortunately, flip a switch and just take plants that are building cars and all of a sudden make them SUVs. So as the industry incentives were already high coming out of the recession for obvious reasons, and then when the market shifted at a much greater rate, or much faster rate than anybody forecasted, everyone doubled down just to keep what production was there. Now we're starting to see, I think, in our case, we're starting to see that we believe we have production fairly normalized from where the truly customer demand is. And now we're starting to see some of these, crazy high incentives where we put us all in a position that we're selling deals versus product. It's starting to transition back. Now we're back into the product cycle of the business, which is a much healthier place to be.
So you brought up the mix, and I noticed for the first quarter we were inched up to 69.4% trucks and sport utes. Some of your competitors have announced that they're going to eliminate the production and sale of a wide variety of passenger vehicles. I haven't seen those proclamations from Toyota. You, of course, have been always one of the leaders in passenger vehicles. What do your great forecasters say about the comeback of the passenger car, and does that position you extremely well for the future?
So I'll put it to you this way. We've recently, in the last 24 months, we launched the new Camry. Today, we're launching a new Corolla. We're going to introduce a new passenger car along with a new SUV tomorrow at the auto show. So overall, where the market, if everything's staying, we think the market has a little bit more energy, can go to about 72% SUVs, and then start to plateau at that basis. But at the 70-30 mix, the U.S. is a massive market. There was 17 million cars sold last year. 30% of 17 million is still 5.2, 5.3 million vehicles. So frankly, I'm okay if we get 100% market share of 5.2, 5.3 million passenger cars. We're committed to passenger cars. It's our core strength. We're going to stay there. But if anybody's watching the news today, oil prices are continuing to kick up. You know, the manufacturers and the dealers who win in the market are the ones that best fill the consumer need. So just as quickly as consumers migrated over to SUVs, there's a chance that it could come back the other way. So we're happy where we are, and if major OEMs decide to get out of the sedan business as they announced, we're good with that also.
Well, good. Well, I see our time is up, and our time here today is up as well. I have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, please join us downstairs in the gallery on Lexington for our reception, which will cook off at 5:30 or earlier if you get down there. Secondly, I just want to remind you that we put on 2 auto events, perennial auto events with international auto shows. Enjoy the show tomorrow. You'll get a press pass with your ticket here. And then, of course, we hope to see you in Los Angeles on November the 19th when J.D. Power and NADA will do the Auto Conference LA. So thanks for coming.
Peter, may I put a shameless plug in?
Absolutely, Bob.
Please stop by the Toyota display at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We got 2 great new products coming out the show.
All right.